Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. My name is Leah Whitmore. I'm 35, a senior architect in a firm that pays me well but expects my soul in return. I'm married to James, a high school history teacher with a gentle heart, a vintage jazz collection, and a laugh that used to unravel. We met in college. Fell in love over cheap wine, rainy campus afternoons, and long debates about films and novels. We married at 27. For years. We were more than content, we were solid, until we weren't. Something shifted quietly between us, not overnight. It was slow, almost imperceptible, like warmth leaking from a house with poor insulation, you said, without title shack, you said. My name is Leah Whitmore. I'm 35, a senior architect in a firm that pays me well but expects my soul in return. I'm married to James, a high school history teacher with a gentle heart, a vintage jazz collection, and a laugh that used to unravel me. We met in college. Fell in love over cheap wine, rainy campus afternoons, and long debates about films and novels. We married at 27. For years. We were more than content, we were solid, until we weren't. Something shifted quietly between us. Not overnight. It was slow, almost imperceptible, like warmth leaking from a house with poor insulation. We stopped staying up talking. We fell asleep to the glow of separate screens. James started falling asleep early, and I stayed up working. Late or pretending to dot my loneliness wasn't loud. It was polite. It didn't scream or cry. It sat with me in traffic. It stood with me at the copier. It followed me home and slipped between my bones like fog. I told myself I was tired, not unhappy. But I wasn't sure anymore. Then came the new intern. His name was Daniel. He was 28, confident in a way that didn't need to announce itself. Smart, charming, and a little cocky, but in a disarming way. He asked thoughtful questions, challenged my ideas gently, always with a smirk that suggested he knew I'd like the challenge. We worked late together one Thursday. A storm blew in, hard rain against the windows, the kind that makes the city feel far away and strangely private. The office thinned out until it was just the two of us. He stood behind me while I reviewed a blueprint on my monitor, too close. His breath stirred the hairs at the back of my neck. I felt something, then awareness, a current. And when I turned to respond to a question, he didn't even finish. Our eyes locked, not professionally, not respectfully. There was heat there, recognition, danger. I looked away first, but I didn't stop it. That night, in the elevator, he stood beside me silently, not touching, but my hand brushed his accidentally, or maybe not accidentally. He didn't move, and neither did I. I didn't sleep that night. The next few days were careful, too careful. I avoided eye contact. He didn't push. But I felt him. Watching. Not aggressively. Not inappropriately. Just waiting. One evening, after a client pitch that ran too long, we shared a ride back toward our part of the city. I had wine. Just enough to feel everything softened, tilted. The city blurred past the windows. And then it happened. He reached over, gently brushing a strand of hair off my cheek, lingering just a second too long. I turned my face to look at him, and we were closer than I realized. I should have said something. Should have pulled away instead. I reached for his hand. I meant to hold it, to find some sort of innocent grounding. But instead, I felt him harden in my hand, and I lost control. My breath caught. His eyes locked on mine. And the dam cracked. I kissed him first, desperately, quietly. His lips found mine in a surge, soft at first, then urgent. The driver said nothing. Our bodies pressed together in the low-lit back seat. The hum of the city wrapped around us. There was no thinking, just heat. Hunger, recklessness that had slept inside me for years, suddenly wide awake and ravenous. We didn't go home. His apartment was modern, spare, and smelled like cedar. I barely noticed. I didn't want to notice. Clothes fell away. Time unraveled. And when we collapsed into bed hours later, I didn't feel guilt. I felt alive. The aftermath came quietly the next morning. As I dressed, he watched me with a question in his eyes. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Don't." And I left. James was still asleep when I got home. Our bedroom smelled like linen and old dreams. I stood in the shower until my skin turned pink dot. The next weeks became a careful tangle of guilt and addiction. I told myself it was a mistake, but I returned. Again. And again, I kept waiting for it to stop, for it to burn out. But instead, it deepened, not just lust, but connection, laughter, secret smiles and meetings, coffee shop dates and corners. Mornings when I'd wake in Daniel's bed, still aching from the night before, and dread returning to my real life. I lied to James. I lied easily. That scared me. Then one night, James cooked dinner. Real effort. Wine, candles, music. He looked at me like he hadn't in years. I saw tears in his eyes when he said, "I miss you, Leah." And I broke, not in front of him, but inside. I excused myself, cried in the bathroom until my ribs ached. I saw two women in the mirror, one who loved her husband, and one who'd let go of him quietly, one craving something electric. I ended it with Daniel the next day. He didn't fight it. He just nodded, said, "I knew it wouldn't last. But I'm glad it happened." I nodded too. But I wasn't sure. I agreed. The grief was different than I expected. It wasn't just guilt over what I'd done. It was mourning for a version of myself I buried long before Daniel ever touched me. A woman who once wanted things without shame, who used to feel James, and I went to therapy. We tried. For a while, we pretended it was working, but eventually I confessed. Not every detail, but the truth of it. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just looked hollowed out. He moved out a month later. Now I live alone in a loft with too many windows and not enough noise. I water my plants. I go to work. I run in the mornings, write in the evenings. I still think of both men, James with his quiet pain, Daniel with his fire. Sometimes I ask myself, was it worth it? And the honest answer is, I don't know, but I know I'm not numb anymore, and that, for now, is enough. After the affair ended, I moved into the loft above the laundromat, waking every morning to the strange hum of textile machines and wind across my spacious windows. I learned to cook for one, to sleep without the echo of guilt, to breathe without expectation. I wrote obsessively. In journals, late at night, the words spilling out like confessions. I felt them harden in my hand and lost control. I wrote scenes I couldn't live. Stories about women whose fractures were adrenaline-colored, the ones who surrendered and then tried to piece themselves together again. James and I tried therapy. For months, we sat on opposite ends of a plush couch, communicating like strangers. There were polite words, "I'm sorry's," and "we should try's," and quiet admissions that comfort isn't love. Then came the unexpected turn. One afternoon, I met him at the cafe where I'd crafted so many scenes. He wore a pale blue shirt, soft eyes, carrying a notebook I recognized. Ethan, the poet I'd become friends with through online workshops. We'd occasionally met him helping with edits, me asking questions about structure. He'd once asked, "When you write about heartbreak, whose voice is it?" I never answered that day. He slipped into the booth beside me and cleared his throat. "I read something you published recently," he said softly. That line where you describe regret in the present tense, it broke me. I felt my chest tighten. "You deserve someone who stays above betrayal's tide," he continued. "So your self-worth isn't lost in the wake." He didn't know what it cost me to stay alive afterward. But he said it gently, like he offered truth not as accusation, but a sanctuary. We began to write together poems and essays, me architectural metaphors, him natural images. We met weekly, sometimes walking afterward to feed ducks or trace. Words and steam on coffee windows. I started trusting mornings again. On a drizzly evening at a reading event, Ethan waited for me outside. I was shaking with nerves after reading a new story. He looked at me, protective and kind, Then he offered his arm. Not an ownership, just presence. We walked down wet sidewalks under street lamps, and I realized I felt something different. Not the ache of transgression, but the relief of safety. When he took both my hands in his and said very quietly, "Thank you for showing up," I felt breathless. But this time with something new. One night soon after, he kissed me. Soft and respectful, no desperation. Like he knew what it could mean. To let something begin again. I didn't pull away. 6 months later, we found ourselves in a warm living room of a friend's house, among other writers and lovers of stories. Rain tapped at the windows. I had a glass of wine. He offered his hand for calm. We talked about honesty and fault, and how heartbreak taught me the difference between wanting and needing. I asked him, "Are you here because I'm broken?" He laid his finger on mine. "I'm here because your cracks let the light in that night." Under yellow light, as conversations deepened around us, Ethan slipped away for a moment. He returned with 2 small notebooks bound in leather. "In case you keep writing," he said, handing me one. "I'll use this one." He tapped the other. "Let's keep writing together." Tears stung, not tears of grief, but of permission. In the months that followed, we moved in together, my loft, his calm presence. The apartment felt full of flowers on the sill, books stacked and arranged, rain on the roof like applause. I wrote in the mornings. He read by the window, fingers tracing lines. We cooked dinner together. We shared silence that felt like peace. One evening, I placed the second leather notebook he'd given me inside my coat pocket. Walks to the park later, his hands slipping into mine. We watched sunsets smear across the sky in burnt ochre. I said, "I never thought I'd want safe again. But trusting this kind of tenderness is wildfire too." He kissed my forehead and whispered back, "Not all fire destroys. Some burn slow and bright. In time." I published a small collection of essays, architecture of betrayal, reclamation and ruin, wanting soft. Readers wrote back, "I survived it. I'm still learning not to collapse." Ethan was there beside me at the launch. He reached for my hand as I read, my voice steady and my heart still. That night, later, we walked home in the cool air, wind carrying that smell of autumn leaves and promise. He stopped at our door and turned to me. "I love you," he said. I closed my eyes. Quiet, "I love you too," I answered. And minutes steady as a foundation. We entered, lights warm. I held him close while rain drummed on the roof. Not with urgency, not with guilt, but with choice. I lost control once, but not again, not with him. I felt him harden in my hand. And from that, I learned how to rebuild on my terms, with care, into someone who could choose softness, trust, love that. Didn't demand surrender, but offered sanctuary. This love is not perfect. There are still shadows that echo from past storms. But with him, I am learning to want not because I'm empty, but because space can hold me full. In the months that followed moving in with Ethan, the subtle rhythms of recovery settled in. The apartment felt alive, morning light through patterned curtains, warm mugs in waiting, pages turning together across our lap. Where once there was echo and emptiness, now nestled trust and small intimacies. Ethan and I built rituals around softness. Sunday mornings in a small cafe, reading new poems aloud between sips of coffee. Evenings cooking together, me adjusting seasonings while he stirred risotto, soft laughter weaving between us. One night, he framed me in his arms while I carried a low-lit bowl of soup through our narrow hallway. I pressed my forehead to his chest and allowed myself to feel safe, but the hardest transformations came quietly. In moments no one would notice. One rainy Thursday, I found an old sketchbook of mine filled with architectural lines that charted both shame and desire. His words beside those drawings said, "You're more than what happened. You're what keeps." Choosing to feel. He didn't try to fix me, he just stayed. And in his staying, I learned that love, the kind I craved, the kind I withheld, could be a series of gentle returns instead of dangerous abandonments. A new season arrived, winter. Cold pressed against our windows, steam from tea on our tongues, layers of soft blankets on the couch. I woke one morning to Ethan tracing my outline in sleep, thumb grazing the soft curve of my side. I held my breath not in fear, but in a sense of wonder. That same evening, he carried 2 steaming mugs to the table, set one beside me, then reached across and traced my ring finger thoughtfully. "I found this in your sketchbook," he said quietly, securing a folded note between my cup and plate. It read, "Sometimes it takes losing yourself to find how wide your own heart can." His eyes, softly illuminated by candlelight, met mine. In them, I felt trust. Real trust. I touched his cheek gently, breath warm on his skin. "I didn't always deserve you, but now you do," he whispered. We leaned in and kissed. Not passionate, not urgent, but slow, deliberate, a promise etched in softness. 6 months later, I read from a short collection of essays at a retrospective reading night. My voice was steady, present. After I finished, the room's applause felt like acceptance. Not just from others, but from myself. Outside, Ethan waited by the door, his coat wrapped around us both. He slipped his hand into mine and said, "You showed so many women how to want safe. With that, I fall again." I squeezed his hand, warmth folding into my chest. "Then let's fall together." He nodded, lips curved with intention. Back at our apartment, I found him waiting with candles, quiet music, and 2 glasses of wine set on the coffee table. He pulled me into the hug I hadn't realized I needed. "I love you," he said softly into my hair. "I love you too," I answered, steady, unguarded, released into the promise of something true. We held each other, not for reinvention, but for reconnection. No fever, no haze, just real warmth. Now, every dawn begins with me writing at the same desk where the old sketchbook lived. Ethan often sits beside me, reading or writing, sometimes catching my hand when I pause. We still have storms both outside and in memory, but we navigate them as equals, as lovers learning how tenderness builds foundations. I felt him harden in my hand and I lost control, but in losing control once, I discovered what I truly longed for. Not chaos. Not surrender, but someone tender enough to ask, over and over, who wants morning and midnight, who holds me awake not despite my past, but with it. That presence became my anchor. And with him, I chose something safer, something honest, something forever becoming. We are imperfect, rooted in our fractures, but choosing each other anyway. And in that choice, love takes shape. Soft, steady, and whole.